The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports. You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And if I'm a little bit amped up, ladies and gentlemen, that is how much energy has been coursing through this stadium ever since about 5 seconds left in the game. Everybody pretty much packing up. Everybody pretty much saying, it's been a good season, but this is one of those here we go again moments where the Washington Commanders are going to squander away what should have been a victory. And then Jayden Daniels scrambling around, running around. I heard the Jim Nantz call. I heard the Bram Weinstein call from the team broadcast. Heard it all. Running around, scrambling around, getting set, throwing the ball up. Noah Brown brings in the 50-plus yard. It was actually thrown from the 35-yard line. So officially, it's a little over 50 yards for a touchdown, but it's actually much longer than that. 18-15. And if you're stat box watching, if you're box score watching, you're going to go 18-15. Yuck. What a disgusting game. And in some ways, okay, maybe it was. But 18-15, one of the most exhilarating football moments I have ever had the pleasure of putting my eyes on. And I will tell you right now, with no shame, there were people in that press box breaking press box rule. There's no reactions. There's no outbursts allowed in the press box, ladies and gentlemen. But guess what? That press box is a little bit different when that pass went down. Chicago media for one reason, Washington media for another reason. You don't got to be a fan of a team to be a fan of great football plays, and that was a great football moment. Talked to a lot of players in the locker room after the game, including Terry McLaurin, including Frankie Louvu, including Jeremy Reeves, who you all know puts his emotion, puts his heart, puts his intent behind everything he does. I had a really good conversation with Jeremy off the record. Then we also had a really good conversation on the record. I've got that recorded for you. We're going to drop all of that on Monday, so make sure you're keeping up with that. But the basic bottom line takeaway from talking to Jeremy, talking to some of these other guys, and the takeaway that I want to share with Commanders fans here as we all kind of revel in the amazing occurrence that just happened on Sunday night is that good things happen to good teams. Luck, there is a little bit of an element of luck to almost everything that you do in life that's successful, but luck is also a byproduct of preparation. And you're going to hear Terry McLaurin, if you come back through tomorrow for those interviews that I'll be dropping on the interview playlist on the Locked On Commanders YouTube page, you're going to hear Terry McLaurin talk about how they practice this. They practice exactly what they just did on a regular basis. You've heard us talk about to you, local media members, talk to you guys about watching them practice 2-minute drills, end of half scenarios, end of game scenarios over and over and over again during training camp. You've heard your head coach, Dan Quinn, talk about practicing those scenarios over and over again during game preparation. You heard Dan Quinn earlier this week talk about if Jayden Daniels has to miss a couple days of practice and still has to play, it's not the end of the world because there are unscouted looks. There are things that they've installed and practiced over and over and over again that they haven't unveiled in games. And he even mentioned to us, the local media that were in attendance, said, you guys have seen things that we installed back in training camp that we haven't unveiled yet in an actual game. And I can confirm to you that that is, in fact, fact. That preparation is what ultimately leads to these types of things. Because raise your hand if you're one of the people across the world, across the country watching this game or in the stadium watching this game. We were watching Jayden Daniels scrambling around saying, dude, you got to throw the ball. Raise your hand if that was you, because I was one of them. I'll tell you, there was plenty of other ones. And I can tell you, listen to Jim Nantz even. He didn't say it, but you almost hear it in his voice. He's like, Jayden Daniels scrambling. We're going to extend this a little bit longer. He's basically saying in his tone of voice, dude, Jayden, throw the ball. And what you don't want to see, what you never want to see, is the end of a game scenario, Hail Mary scenario, where a quarterback takes a sack, right? That's definitely what you don't want to see, especially when your quarterback is coming off of an injury. So to see him scramble around, do that kind of stuff, set up his platform, get his base under him, and then fire the ball, there's a reason behind it. There's a purpose behind it. That purpose comes from that preparation. That preparation leads to the opportunity to execute things like this. Now, do you need the ball to bounce the right way? Absolutely. Do you need a dummy? And I'm sorry, I try not to do this, but I'm going to be disrespectful to Tyreek Stevenson, Chicago Bears defensive back, because not here, but about 50 or so feet, 50 meters, well, not 25 meters or so to my right, your left, if you're looking at me, he was over here mocking y'all. He was over here mocking Washington Commanders fans, thinking that he and his team were about to carry a W in their carry-on baggage on their way back to Chicago. Well, Tyreek Stevenson is somewhere in the air right now on his way back to Chicago with a big fat L packed in that carry-on. And part of the reason is because he wasn't prepared. He would rather talk trash to Commanders fans, to people who, you've all heard the whole, lion don't worry about the opinion of sheep and all that stuff. But really what it comes down to is the man in the arena, right? The man in the arena, the warrior, the combatant doesn't worry about the opinion of the people watching necessarily. Tyreek Stevenson would rather focus on you than focus on the competitors on the field, especially number 85, Noah Brown. And what ends up happening, if you go watch, there was a great clip of it taken by a Commanders fan. I'm so glad he thought to bring his phone out. I wish I had his Twitter handle off the top of my head, but I don't, so I apologize. But please go find it because it's an amazing video. I love it. And I can't wait for former players who are now in the media to rip him to shreds because it's absolutely what should and will happen. But he's over here talking trash to Commanders fans. The ball gets snapped. He's still talking trash to Commanders fans. Then he says, oh, okay, I'll go get involved in this Hail Mary. The ball gets thrown. He runs over, jumps up, doesn't try to knock the ball down. No. Doesn't try to knock the ball down, which going back to Pee Wee, I mean, the earliest stages of tackle football, what do you do in a Hail Mary? You knock the ball down. You don't knock the ball up. You don't try to tip it. You don't try to catch it. You knock the ball down. What does Tyreek Stevenson go and do? He goes up, he reaches up, tips it, goes up in the air, right in the hands of Noah Brown. Karma, instant karma in its finest, ladies and gentlemen. It couldn't happen to a better guy than Tyreek Stevenson. That's all I'm going to say because hopefully Tyreek Stevenson is actually a really good dude and bounces back from this and doesn't deserve all the backlash that's about to happen, but he deserves the backlash that's about to happen today because he is part of the reason the Washington Commanders walk away with an 18-15 win over the Chicago Bears. They needed that win because the Cincinnati Bengals couldn't do their stinking job and beat the Philadelphia Eagles. Instead, they lose by double digits. I think it was like 20-point margin of victory for the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Philadelphia Eagles keeping pace in the NFC East, but because the Washington Commanders come away with the win here tonight, still first place in the NFC East division, and we're headed to New Jersey next weekend for a date with the New York Giants. Washington Commanders trying to go 2-0 inside the division, also trying to go get their 7th win. Remember, guys, this team was projected to win 6.5 games to start the season. It's not even Halloween yet, and this team's already got 6. One more win exceeds that total, and you got people on Fox Sports broadcast, NFL Game Day Morning talking about, is this Washington Commanders team going to win 10 games? And when their name comes up in that conversation, you got the hosts on that panel sitting there saying, yeah, they're going to win 10 games. Don't worry about that. They're going to win 10 games. That is the new Washington Commanders. There's a media member in the press box. I'm not going to out him. It's not a bad thing, but I'm not going to say names, but was having a little bit of a reaction to the game that happened, to what just unfolded out here in Northwest Stadium. And I walked over to him and I said, welcome to new Commanders football. So Washington Commanders fans, welcome to new Commanders football. Guys, I can't even lie to you. I had to be completely transparent. I was packing up my stuff, getting ready to go downstairs, be like, man, this locker room is going to suck. Man, these press conferences are going to suck. I was like, it's cold out here, and it is cold out here. It didn't get warm just because they won. It is cold out here. But I was thinking about asking my insiders, like, hey, man, y'all mind if I just drive home and do this episode from my office? Because I really just want to get out of here right now. But the energy was low. And I'll be honest with you, I think the whole stadium was basically a bunch of tension, right? It was a bunch of tension about, here we go again. Like, let's be honest. It was a here we go again moment. Hopefully you were fighting it saying, okay, maybe it's just a one-off for this group, right? But you can't lie and say it wasn't a here we go moment. Talking to Jeremy Reeves after the game, I mentioned this before, and he flat out said to us, man, 2 years ago, this win doesn't happen. And I've heard that so many times from fans, from you guys this year, that last year, this win doesn't happen. 2 years ago, that win doesn't happen, or that play doesn't happen. And you're right, but it's a different team. It's a different era. And again, if you want to get text messages from me while you're watching it, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to try it out for the first 2 weeks. If you're an audio listener, appreciate all of you, video and audio. Obviously, if you're on audio, you can't see what I'm saying, take a look at, but you can find the play on Twitter. You can find the play on any NFL highlight show. I guarantee it. Look at where Noah Brown caught the pass. We are standing literally right outside those 2 M's in the Commanders logo in the end zone. The Commanders had to do 3 things to win this game. These are things that we lined up in our crossover Thursday episode this last week with Locked On Bears host Lauren Cox. Again, one of my favorite hosts on this network. He's a great dude. Really feel bad for him having to do this episode, but I've been on your side of this coin here, Lauren. So it's your turn, buddy. We got 3 things that they had to do. First must do, contain Caleb Williams, collapse the pocket. Second must do, maximize turnover-worthy plays. Third must do, run the ball. We're going to start right there. I said I wanted to see the combination of Brian Robinson Jr., Austin Eckler, Jeremy McNichols, the running backs, get at least 26 carries in this game. Wouldn't be mad with 28, wouldn't be mad with 30. Wanted to see them get at least 26 carries in the game. Well, they got 24. And you know what? I mean, obviously, I'm going to be okay with that. I'm not going to try to sit here and be like, they almost wasted it away because they didn't listen to me, because that's not necessarily the case. But still, overall, ran the ball effective enough that you didn't allow the Chicago Bears defense to try to get one-dimensional, right? Brian Robinson finishes 16 carries, 65 yards, 4.1 yards per carry average. Not terrible. That was Jayden Daniels. Austin Eckler, 7 carries, 52 yards, 7.4 yards per carry. There was a stretch there, and I know some Commanders fans noticed it. I noticed it. We never got any official words on an injury or anything like that, so that's kind of the best we can go off of. But there was a stretch there in the second half where Brian Robinson wasn't really on the field all that much. Now, he did end up coming back onto the field, so hopefully everything is okay there, and we'll get some, obviously we'll see if he practices fully throughout the week leading up to the Giants game, all that stuff. Jeremy McNichols only had 1 carry. He lost 1 yard on that carry. Jayden Daniels ends up running the ball 8 times for 52 yards. It's a 6.5 yards per carry average for Jayden Daniels. So running the ball effectively. Overall, you're talking north of 30 rushes, I should say, for the Washington Commanders. So certainly hit that number as a total group, but I was really looking to see more out of the running backs. I can't sit here right now and say like, hey, on these drives where they ran the ball with running backs 3 or more times, they got in scoring position versus the drives. I can't do that right now because I haven't had time to dive into the numbers. But basically, they got close, so we'll give it half credit, right? The second one, maximize turnover-worthy plays. Honestly, Caleb Williams, he missed on quite a few throws here today on this field. Certainly looked rattled. Certainly looked like he was a quarterback under pressure, a young rookie who was certainly feeling the tension of the moment and the pressure that the Washington Commanders defense was getting on him. The Washington Commanders defense ends up coming away with a couple of sacks here. Johnny Newton got his first career NFL sack. He also got his first career NFL takeaway. So congratulations, Johnny. Johnny definitely had a very good game. And if it wasn't for a Hail Mary, game winner would be the number 1 star of today's game. Daron Payne also came up with a sack. The Daron Payne sack, of course, was quote unquote probably should have been or could have been a Frankie Louvu sack. Frankie Louvu said he doesn't care who gets credit for the sack as long as they get the sack. And of course, Frankie Louvu, you believe him when he says that kind of thing. He doesn't worry about his own personal stat box. He's caring about the team. But Frankie Louvu comes in, gets the initial pressure on Caleb Williams, ends up losing his grip on him, takes a piece of his jersey or his t-shirt with him. But ultimately, it's Daron Payne that has to clean it up and gets credit for the sack. But the turnover-worthy play or the turnover opportunity that they really had to take advantage of course, was down here. In fact, down on the other end of the field as we're talking, where the Chicago Bears were trying to get into the end zone. Caleb Williams trying to hand it off to a fullback. Not sure which of the Bears players it actually was specifically, but it was an up back, fullback type, maybe a tight end lined up as a fullback. Ends up losing the ball. It's called a fumble. It's called an aborted play, is what it was officially named. And Caleb Williams gets credit for the fumble that ends up popping right into Johnny Newton's waiting hands. And he took full advantage, ends up going down to the turf, but he ends up sprinting all the way down here where we're standing now to celebrate with you guys. Well, he was like over there somewhere, but come down to celebrate with Commanders fans, getting his first NFL takeaway of his career. So certainly taking advantage of the turnover-worthy opportunities. Like I said, Caleb Williams, when he did miss, most of his misses today were overthrows, and they were overthrown. They're basically overthrowing everybody. So certainly not a lot of interception opportunities per se for the Washington Commanders defense. So we're going to kind of give that one a push there. Number 1 must do, though, is contain Caleb Williams, keep him in the pocket as much as possible and collapse that pocket. And even though Caleb Williams does end up with 41 yards rushing on 10 carries, it's a 4.1 yards per carry average. You have to remember, this is a quarterback who was getting 50 yards running on defenses with 5 scrambles, 5 carries, things like that. There were a couple of design runs late in the game that the Commanders defense was able to stuff, so that was able to keep the average a little bit lower than it probably could have been. But I think overall, you come away happy with the pressure that the Washington Commanders defense was able to get on Caleb. He ends up 10 for 24, so less than a 50% per completion percentage. And like we talked about beforehand, when teams are getting pressure on him, even if he's not getting sacked, he's not completing a high rate of his passes. So that certainly reflects there. 131 yards passing, 59.5 passer rating. And it was really unfortunate because coming into the end of the game, especially as the Chicago Bears took the late lead, it was really just unfortunate hearing the national, more than anything, storylines getting ready to come out of Caleb Williams, the hero, and Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall pick, vanquishing the number 2 overall pick, Jayden Daniels, who just a couple of weeks ago was getting MVP buzz and all this stuff. But Caleb comes out and shows that he was the number 1 quarterback, number 1 pick for a reason. Look, Jayden Daniels didn't have the greatest game in the world from a pass completion percentage standpoint, right? The Chicago Bears defense certainly flexed its muscles a little bit against this Commanders offense. I think we can all admit that. Jayden Daniels, 21 of 38, but he did pass for 326 yards. Now, granted, again, 50 plus of that was on the final play, but still 280 or so, 270 yards on the day, and finishes with a 92.7 passer rating. Take off the touchdown, you're probably looking at about a 60 passer rating. So it wouldn't have been this narrative of, man, look how much better Caleb was than Jayden. But unfortunately, I feel like some national outlets would have taken that way. So I'm really glad we don't have to have that conversation. Instead, we can praise the Washington Commanders defense, who held the Chicago Bears offense to just 2 scores, right? You only had 2 scores. Now, there were 2 touchdowns, 1 fluky 50-plus yard run by DeAndre Swift. But the Washington Commanders end up constructing 5 scoring drives, really 6 scoring opportunities if you count the missed field goal by Austin Cyber, which originally was called a blocked kick, but as we watched the replays, clearly was not a blocked kick. So we get to now instead spend the next couple of days praising the defense for the overall performance. Again, late in the game, things kind of went south on them, but I think a lot of that is time of possession related, as the Washington Commanders offense really sputtered in the second half. They come out, punt, field goal, punt, miss field goal, punt. So a lot of plays, 2, 3 and outs in the second half there. I mean, ultimately they end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 possessions in the second half. The Washington Commanders do. It shows how much they were getting off the field, or how quickly they were getting off the field. And in the first half, only had 5 possessions. So that shows just a little bit of the ball control problem that led ultimately probably to some of the defensive collapses there in the late second half that allowed the Chicago Bears to get back in the game.
If you're an NFL fan and you're looking for a big return, look no further than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Plus, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can put that $5 on Monday Night Football. The Steelers are solid favorites tonight against the Giants. I actually already have this one in my dance card, with Russell Wilson's debut sending good vibes to the Steel City. FanDuel thinks Pittsburgh can keep it going. They're favored by 5.5. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started.
Starting to feel like Groundhog's Day around here, Landon. The Cowboys lose again to the...
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast.
Landon, the Cowboys lose again. For whatever reason, the bye week did not cure all of their problems and all of their ailments. The Cowboys lose 30-24 in a really weird game because the Cowboys jumped out to a 10-3 lead, and it felt like, okay, this thing is starting to settle down a little bit. And then I believe the 49ers scored 27 straight points or something like that.
It's 24.
24 straight points. Cowboys battled back, actually had a chance to win this game in regulation, and did not gain another yard. So I don't know whether to feel good that they battled back. I don't know whether to feel bad that it got so ugly to begin with. I don't know how to feel other than just general disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think general disappointment is a good one, right? But I listen. Part of me is like, this is just shows you where the state of this team is. Honestly, is that I was glad to just not see them blown out. Like I mean,
and I tweeted that like it was another non-competitive fourth quarter, and it actually became one late in the late in the quarter.
It did, and I actually really appreciated that they put in the effort and fought back and put themselves in a position. But it doesn't make me feel good about this team because once again, like, look, I mean, the problem is that we go into this game, we know that this defense is compromised. And in fact, it probably, as of Sunday morning, is more compromised than we even imagined because Carson wasn't even playing despite practicing all week, right? And then we find out that the starting running back isn't playing. That's part of another segment later that we'll talk about. But it just, it started, the vibes around the team just at that point, it just started to really kind of snowball. And then the slate of games that went through the early in the afternoon games didn't fall the Cowboys' way, certainly for lining up their playoff chances. So all this is to say is that you go into the game with just incredibly bad vibes. It's like you go into the bye and things just kind of continually got worse, and it all kind of crescendos before game time. and then somehow you managed to get into halftime with a 10-3 lead. It was a 10-3, I think, right? Or 10-6, maybe?
10-6. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I thought that was about as good a first half outcome as you could have, right?
Yeah.
It was just a roller coaster of a game. And then obviously the third quarter happened, and it felt like the game was completely out of hand. And then obviously, as you mentioned, it got within a 6-point game at a certain point, with the Cowboys having an opportunity with the ball in their hands with just over 2 minutes and some change to go down and win the game, not like tie it up, but go score a touchdown and win the game. And obviously a disappointment in the offense, ineptitude in the offense reared its ugly head again as the Cowboys go 0 for 4. Just not just a 3 out, a 4 out. Just really just depressing, sad stuff. Really.
So we're going to talk about the offense and the defense and all that stuff. We're going to do some big picture stuff now.
Mm-hmm.
Even on the final drive of the game, when the Cowboys had a chance to win it, I felt numb, almost to the point of like, hey, this is cool if they pull it off, but like, this isn't a good team. Like, and it's a weird spot to be in. And you and I were talking pre-show, like, this isn't a fun Cowboy team to watch. I don't think they're very good, as evident by their record in their last couple of games. They are in a spot that you and I have really never been in before, covering this team over the last 7 or 8 years, where they've basically been highly competitive in every season. And then the seasons that they weren't, 2020, was because of a big injury. Like, yes, they have Micah Parsons hurt, but they have their quarterback healthy. They have the entire offensive line healthy. CeeDee Lamb's healthy. They're just not very good.
I think my brand, as long as I've been doing this or talking about the Cowboys or talking about football, and I'm going to continue to bring it up, to me, is I think context matters, right? And this is why, imagine how much better you would feel about the performance you've seen from this season, right? If at the beginning of the season, the front office had talked to you and was just straightforward, said, hey, this is a rebuilding year. We're doing a soft rebuild. We're trying to get some money cleared off of our contracts. We're trying to reset the things around here and kind of reload. Obviously you can't say all that because you guys have guys on 1-year contracts and Mike McCarthy on a 1-year contract. But I think that there are other ways to sort of just kind of imply that this is a year, a regathering year, as opposed to all in and say all the things that they said before the season, right? I think that part of the issue here is that this team is clearly going through a kind of, like we've talked about, soft rebuild. They're playing like it. And because the expectations being said by everyone in the building are, no, we're competing to try to win a Super Bowl this year, and we're trying to win the NFC East. And then they're putting this out on the field. It's gaslighting and it feels offensive and it makes us all very angry. But the truth of the matter is that that's clearly what's happening here and that's why we talk about this. This team just isn't very talented. They're just not quite.
They were a team that wasn't super deep and they couldn't afford injuries. And then they just got a bunch of them on defense, even more in this game, right? Like 4 defensive ends. You were without 3 corners at one point. Like,
and the defense was frankly the side that may have played better, all things speaking, considering what they had to go up against.
The expectations,
right?
Yeah.
Like the expectations like that. And I think that's really the big problem, right? Is that the defense has an excuse, right? They're down 4 defensive ends and 2 corners in this game, right? Against, against a Kyle Shanahan offense. The offense has not had an excuse for the most part, and at least you got a positive CD Dak performance out of this game. I think CD tied, if not broke, his receptions record for in game. But I mean, obviously, almost nothing else about this game makes you feel great about the offense moving forward. I mean, I think the running game just looked minorly better, but I think that was mostly just San Francisco having their own depth issues. So. Not a lot to hang your hat on unless you have Dak and CD in your fantasy team.
Yeah, and again, we'll talk about the defense, but think about how low our expectations are for the Cowboys defense, where they give up 470 yards of offense. They allow 30 points, create 0 turnovers, and we're fairly happy with how they performed on that side of the ball. Like, that's where we're at.
I mean, they contained the disaster, which I thought would just spread like 3 Mile Island. They contained the disaster to just basically the third and the beginning of the fourth quarter, which they got almost all that offense that you're talking about. I mean, not all of it, but they got most of that offense all just in 4 drives in the beginning of the second half. So and then drives, I think, that would also corresponded with the Cowboys, I think, doing 5 3-and-outs, or at least 5 drives where they came away with no points, and at least 3 3-and-outs in a row, really putting the defense, in a terrible position. And they just eventually broke.
Yeah. Again, big picture things. Cowboys are 3-4 now, and I believe their next 5 games are against teams with winning records.
Yeah.
I watched football all day, Layden. Teams just, you could stack them up compared to the other teams in the NFC. They're just not as talented, and frankly, they're just not as good. Like, this is not a playoff team. Now, maybe something happens, something clicks, like we saw in 2018, that right before they got Amari Cooper, they were 3-5 and things took off. But I have a hard time seeing that happening again.
And I think the other thing to kind of keep in mind is that, based on what all the other things that we talked about before, I don't think they're going to make huge efforts to try to improve the team.
No.
Right. No. So I think the improvements that are coming from this team are by the players that are on this team. So, and I don't know that that's going to be enough to turn the season around. I think the hope is that you're getting guys up and getting guys ready for, seasons in the future, and getting these young players some experience.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast.
Now, let's talk about the game a little bit, where it all went wrong for this Ravens team. And if we really had the super in-depth conversation on where it went wrong, we'd be sitting here for probably about a day, 24 hours talking about it. But Ravens lose 29-24, just a brutal game for this Ravens team, execution-wise, play calling-wise, sloppiness-wise, mistake-wise. I mean, we could go on and on and on and on about it. It was just a weird game for the coordinators. We talked about Zach Orr a lot and just kind of the interesting decisions and what went into that. Really bad Todd Monken game here. Really bad Todd Monken game, right? I think the momentum could have been a lot better for the Ravens if they had just converted on that 4th and 1 early. But it's a wildcat play to Derrick Henry, takes the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hands. That takes 9/10 of the threat of your offense away when you do that. Because now that defense, and I talked about this on a live show, Lamar has such a gravity to him. And the thing about being Lamar Jackson is you're Lamar Jackson, right? Teams have to follow you. Teams have to account for you, even if you don't get the ball or don't have the ball. But the defense doesn't know that. They have to account for it. So when you take the ball out of his hands, it's ruining most of what makes your offense successful. So they get stopped there. They come away with no points. You have Derrick Henry and you have Lamar Jackson. Use them together. That is what has gotten you this historic level offense. And they just didn't do it. They had a 3rd and 1. And they put Charlie Kohler under center, and he false starts. Just put Lamar under center, put Ricard back there, put Derrick Henry back there, and run the ball. It's that simple. It's that simple. You have drops galore. Rashad Bateman, 2 really bad drops. Other guys had drops as well. So, hopefully, and we'll talk about it if it happens, hopefully we're not going to hear any, Lamar needs to do this, do that. Lamar wasn't his best day. Wasn't his best day. But late in the game, he also put that Superman cape on and tried to win it for him. But he did miss some throws early. A couple he'd definitely like to have back for sure. A couple of throws that definitely should have been intercepted that were not. But Lamar is so far down on the list of things that caused the Ravens to lose this game. There were some throws that, if he hit on those, would have made a big impact. But easy dropped interceptions, bad play calling, bad drops in general, all of that and so much more contributes. And so when you look at the quarterback comparison here, look, Lamar Jackson goes 23 for 38 for 60.5 completion percentage, 289 yards with 2 touchdowns. Jameis Winston, on the other hand, 27 for 41, 65.9%, 334, 3 touchdowns for him, no interceptions. That's the problem here, all right? That's the problem here. What is the problem, you may ask? The Ravens let Jameis Winston look like prime Lamar, look like prime Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, made him look like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And that's with all his mistakes. The Ravens dropped 5 interceptions. They couldn't take advantage of it. Jameis Winston on that last interception, or should have been an interception to Kyle Hamilton, he threw it to Kyle Hamilton. That throw was so far off base, and the Ravens couldn't capitalize on it. The Ravens couldn't capitalize. This was a team loss. They say a win is a team, you lose as a team. This was a pure team loss. Special teams, Justin Tucker misses a field goal. They have penalties galore there. There was just so much, because usually you can think about 1 or 2 plays that cost you a game. They had like 10 or 15 plays that you can point to, and if there's 1 or 2 of those plays hit or go a different way, we're talking about a different ball games. When you look at the game recap here, I mean, Baltimore gets outgained by Cleveland, not by a ton, right? Only by 14 yards, but passing yards wise, Cleveland has more yards per pass. Cleveland pushed the ball down the field a little more. Baltimore averaged more yards per play. But here, to me, is where the Ravens, again, one of the areas, I guess, because there were many that Baltimore lost this game at. The Ravens went 2 for 10 on third down. 2 for 10, 20% on third down. Meanwhile, Cleveland was over 50%, 8 for 15, 53.3%. You have to convert on your third downs, and the Ravens were just, Cleveland's defense was getting off the field, and the Ravens' defense wasn't. The pass rush was awful in this game again. I could argue, and I think many other people would agree with me here, that the Ravens need both a pass rusher and a member of the secondary and a wide receiver. They need all 3 of them. Now, do they go out there and actually make all 3 of those moves? Probably not. But they need something, because the pass rush has not been good recently. I mean, where is it off Owe? David Ojabo was a healthy scratch in this game, right? It's issue after issue piling up for the defense. And then your offense kind of sputters out for multiple different reasons. And that's disaster. But this is a 1-6 football team, or at least they were a 1-6 football team that the Ravens just lost to. Now you have 3 losses. And if I did the math right, the Ravens are the only team in the AFC above 500 with 3 AFC losses. That's rough. That's really bad. And we talked about how important that Cincinnati win was, because it was an AFC divisional game, and it's going to be really good down the pipe when the Ravens are fighting for playoff positioning. Well, the Chiefs are still undefeated. The Steelers play tonight against New York, so we'll see how that unfolds. But this is a game that you really could have had, and you just beat yourself. That's my ultimate, takeaway from this game. At least one of them is the Ravens beat themselves again. They did it again, and that's the disappointing part, because the last team to beat the Ravens was Cleveland last year. And what I mean by that is the Ravens have beaten themselves ever since that Cleveland game, and even last year, the Ravens beat themselves against Indy, against Pittsburgh that year. Obviously, Cleveland beat them. Against Kansas City, they beat themselves. And then you have a game in Las Vegas. Not in Las Vegas, but against Las Vegas, they beat themselves. Kansas City, toe on the line. Kansas City, you could argue. But, man, I mean, just mistake after mistake after mistake. It's an undisciplined team in a lot of areas right now. And it's not the first time we're saying that. And at the end of the day, John Harbaugh, these coaches have to have their guys ready. They're not out there making those plays. It's both on the personnel, the players, and on the coaches. This was a team loss again, but it just has to get better, because for a team with Super Bowl aspirations, they're just too sloppy right now in multiple different facets of the game. The Ravens didn't really get Derrick Henry involved in this one either. Only 11 carries in this game. Not necessarily something I was expecting. I thought that Baltimore was going to be able to run the ball a little more than they did, but at the end of the day, they just never really got that going. And again, I think that sweet spot for Derrick Henry was probably right in that 17 to 21 carry range, but only 11 for 73 in this game. Did get in the end zone late, but I wish they would utilize Derrick Henry a little bit more. Wish they would have in this game.
If you're an NFL fan and you're looking for a big return, look no further than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Plus, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can put that $5 on Monday Night Football. The Steelers are solid favorites tonight against the Giants. I actually already have this one in my dance card, with Russell Wilson's debut setting good vibes to the Steel City. FanDuel thinks Pittsburgh can keep it going. They're favored by 5.5. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, special treat, Dodger fans. I am joined by my good friend, Steven Nelson, Dodgers sometimes TV broadcaster. There is no Dodgers TV broadcast in the postseason, so he is the Dodgers radio play-by-play guy, been doing the postseason with Rick Monday. And I've mentioned several times, Steven, here on this podcast, and I've mentioned you personally. I've heard a lot of your voice this October during the NLCS. I was on vacation where there was no TV or internet, and so I was sitting in my car outside the cabin we were staying in, listening to you on Sirius XM for games 3, 4, and 5 of the NLCS. And I got to tell you, man, I've always loved listening to baseball on the radio. I grew up with Vin Scully on the radio, and it was kind of funny. Like, I don't know, how old are you, Steven?
I'm 35.
Okay, so a lot younger than me. But, you remember Vin and how Vin would do what he would do the first 3 innings as a simulcast,
right?
And then he'd go to 4 through 6 on the radio, and then come back for 7 through 9 on TV. And so after the 3rd inning, he'd say, "Ross will be along in a minute," to call in Ross Porter. And my grandpa, we'd be sitting in my grandpa's garage watching the game on TV. And when Vin said, "Ross will be along in a minute," my grandpa would say, "No, he won't." And he'd turn down the TV and turn on the radio. So, and then after the 6th inning, we'd turn the radio down and turn the TV back up. So we got Vin for all 9 innings. But, one of the things that always, and don't worry, this isn't going to be a whole conversation about why aren't you as good as Vin Scully. I'm sure you've had that conversation plenty of times. But calling on the radio is a different thing that Vinny was amazing at. And you mentioned to me, you haven't really done radio since college. How has that adjustment been for you?
Well, first and foremost, great to finally do this with you. I was, one of the cool moments of the season was running into you in person, in the flesh at the stadium. A couple months ago now.
It was the day that Ohtani hit his 42nd or 43rd homer.
Right, so. Right. The measly 42nd.
That was a long time ago.
A long time ago. I appreciate you having me on. But yeah, you're right. The last time that I had done baseball on radio, I was still a student at Chapman University, and I love my Panthers to death, and I loved my time at Hart Park in Orange, California. To go from that to now, doing Dodgers baseball in October.
Are you saying Chapman University is lower profile than the World Series?
Hey, I would never disparage the good name of a SCIAC powerhouse like Chaptown like that. But it is just a totally different beast. And so, trying to, that cliche, it's just like learning to ride a bike again, right? Getting back on the bike. I was like, well, I never really learned how to ride the bike in the first place because I was a college student. So it's definitely been learning in the fire, and I'm just so grateful to Mo and Dwayne McDonald, our producer. Bassett has been amazing, and even Charlie, as he has gone through just an absolute hellish year. He has been so encouraging. To me, and that's something that I'll be eternally grateful. So I apologize that you were stuck with me on your vacation. That sounds like an awesome vacation, though, to unplug from the world like that.
Yeah, if it wasn't mid-October.
I wish I could have. I wish the AI could have given you Vin's voice on your vacation as opposed to being stuck with me. But it's definitely been a heck of a ride this year.
That's awesome. No, it was great. And another moment that I was recently listening to you for was actually yesterday. I was down in Southern Utah for my son's baseball tournament. I was able to watch game 1 of the World Series on TV. Game 2, my son had a game at the same time playing for the tournament championship. So I took my laptop to the field with me. They did win. He drove in the winning run even. So
what?
Maybe in the segment after this on my live episode, when I'm playing our interview, maybe I'll play the video of my son's game-winning hit.
That's awesome.
But thanks. But I took my laptop to the field with me, so I had the game on my laptop while I'm doing Game Changer on my phone because I'm the official scorer for my son's team. And hardest thing in the world is I'm barely smart enough to remember, okay, pitches that happen in person get tracked in Game Changer. Pitches that happen on the laptop don't get tracked in Game Changer. I'm like, I'm about to put, ball 4. Wait. Oh, that was Juan Soto who walked.
Yeah, that's a stressful scene you're painting right now. The amount of
it was crazy. As if Game 1 wasn't stressful enough,
Right. Oh my gosh.
but we're gonna get to Game 1 in a minute. But Game 2, the game ended, my son's game, and we then drove back to our rental house. And so we listened to you on the radio for the 15-minute drive back to the rental, which happened to be when the guy who won both your and my Hot Dodger bracket, Shohei Ohtani, tried to steal second base and injured himself. And I got to tell you, you painted that picture perfectly for somebody who couldn't see what was going on. And my son and I, like you mentioned, like the stadium went silent. The air was sucked out of our car. My son and I were listening to this game, and just so you painted that picture really well. How relieved were you today to find out that, he's okay?
So here's another scene for you. I'm flying in with, the team was commuting on Sunday to come to New York. And so, myself, Jose Mota, we were sitting in the rows next to each other. And then, we're surrounded by a bunch of Dodgers employees, because, the whole family has basically come out to New York to support the Dodgers for these next few games. And, I had seen the report from Carl Ravitch about what, Doc had said regarding Shohei's status, and Mota and I were like, that's great. 20 minutes later, a member of the flight crew got on the horn and was like, hi, everybody. Hope we're having a good flight. I just want to pass along some news. Dave Roberts has said Shohei Ohtani is expected to play in Game 3. And the plane erupted into cheers and fist pumping. It was the exact opposite scene that we saw at Billy's Sports Bar in the Bronx when that actually went down in Game 2. I think that about sums it up. The relief and the excitement. Now, not totally out of the woods, right? Because you don't know how bad it is. Right?
It's a pain tolerance thing. We don't know how much, is it going to bother him, so.
Right. For Cody Bellinger, it was a pain tolerance thing. Right. And then he showed no signs the next game of, having much intolerance as he went deep after that happened. Right.
If you're an NFL fan and you're looking for a big return, look no further than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Plus, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can put that $5 on Monday Night Football. The Steelers are solid favorites tonight against the Giants. I actually already have this one in my dance card with Russell Wilson's debut sending good vibes to the Steel City. FanDuel thinks Pittsburgh can keep it going. They're favored by 5.5. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started.
Marcel Reed is the hero as Texas A&M stays undefeated in SEC play.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies.
The Aggies are 7-1. The Aggies are undefeated in SEC play. The Aggies have put themselves in a prime position to make a real run this season that could end somewhere very special, and we are talking college football playoff. You put yourself in a prime position to make an SEC championship game. You right now stand alone atop the list when it comes to SEC rankings. Georgia's below you. Texas is below you. Tennessee, LSU, Alabama, all below you. The Aggies are 5-0 in SEC play. This game against LSU, just pure grit from this team. You go down early, then you score to get back into it, then you go back down 10 points, and you just keep finding a way to win the game. We're going to talk more about quarterback. We're going to talk more about what the future looks like here. This has been one of the most interesting seasons in my time as a fan watching college football and this is my time covering college football, this has been one of the weirder seasons when it comes to quarterback play, because it seems like you have multiple guys who make sense, and then this doesn't go well, and then there's an issue with this, and it's just been really weird. But Marcel Reed, Connor Wigman was not playing a great football game. And I agree with what Coach Elko said post-game about, hey, I mean, obviously he was saying Connor wasn't great, but there wasn't a lot there for him, and he felt like the move needed to be made to run the football, and Marcel Reed sure did that. He ran the ball 9 times for 62 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Aggies as a whole ran the football 49 times. And the funniest part about this is the whole time that Marcel Reed was in the game, he only threw the football twice. He completed both of his passes for 70 yards. So y'all understand my that listen every day here at Locked On Aggies. You all know my issues with Marcel Reed, and it was just I felt that the offense flowed a little bit better with Connor Wigman, knowing that you have your running backs that are great, that are going to help you in your run game. And then Connor Wigman is going to be an accurate passer. And Marcel Reed was a guy that his legs are so valuable, but I just thought he wasn't an accurate enough passer. And I thought he needed a little bit more time to develop. I mean, here's the deal. Every time Marcel Reed is given an opportunity, he shines. You even look back last year to Oklahoma State in the bowl game when he's launched into a game. You know what Marcel Reed is? Marcel Reed is a gamer. He is a gamer. I have so much respect for that young man to come in and play great against Florida, play great your whole time as the starter, those few weeks. And then Wigman comes back against Missouri and Wigman looks great. And it looks like you lost your job again. And then you are launched into play against the number 8 team in college football. Your team's behind. You're in trouble. And you just come in and shine, man. I have so much respect for Marcel Reed. What Coach Elko does at quarterback, I don't know. It's still to be seen. I think that this is going to be a fun conversation this week. But I would rather be having this conversation about what are we going to do quarterback-wise. And everyone's going to hop on the Marcel Reed train there. And I'm not saying I'm not. I want to watch the game another time, and I want to look back at things, and I want to think about this realistically. And I will probably end up landing on, I think, knowing the way you run the football. If Marcel Reed can just give you a little bit in the pass game, he makes sense as your guy. That's probably what I'll land on. But I want to run back through this, and we'll talk more about that on Monday. But I'd rather be having this conversation knowing the Aggies got to win than having this conversation knowing Texas A&M lost LSU. It's a lot more fun having this conversation knowing the Aggies just got this massive win over LSU.
If you're an NFL fan and you're looking for a big return, look no further than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Plus, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can put that $5 on Monday Night Football. The Steelers are solid favorites tonight against the Giants. I actually already have this one in my dance card with Russell Wilson's debut sending good vibes to the Steel City. FanDuel thinks Pittsburgh can keep it going. They're favored by 5.5. So what are you waiting for? That's FanDuel.com to get started.
Ohio State fans, we have a problem.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Because your Buckeyes are not playing good enough to beat elite college football teams. And y'all, that's a problem. And it's not just what we saw against Nebraska on Saturday. Think back to what you saw against Oregon, what you saw against Michigan State, what we saw in the first half against Iowa, what we saw against Marshall. Ohio State has a problem. And we went into the season, Denzel Burke said it during an offseason presser, that this is a natty or bust year. Even went a step further saying you got to win every game. And as a competitor, I'm glad that he went that far to say we got to win every game, because I think if you go into a season thinking, oh, we can have 1 or 2 losses and you're cool with that, I will question your level of your competitiveness that you have out there on the field. So I am not mad that Denzel Burke went out there and said that we got to win every game, because that's the mindset I want your leader to have. But when you say natty or bust, you're raising the bar. You're putting that thing extremely high. And then Ohio State every single year is saying, well, we got to beat Michigan. I'm glad you say it. We got to win the conference. I'm glad you say it. Oh, we got to win the natty. That's a level of intensity. That's a level of a standard that is putting your standard lofty, extremely high. And right now, what we saw against Nebraska is just making everybody a little confused and a lot of us concerned, because I'm concerned because Ohio State has time to fix some of their issues, but with some of the injuries on both sides of the ball, I don't know if they're going to be able to, which is a major problem, because you would expect coming off the bye week, a couple weeks to digest some things after your first loss of the season, and you would expect players to be amped up, to be hyped, to be excited, to get back on the field, to be hungry. As James Laurinaitis said in the school session, hey, we're angry, we're going to play fast. And I'm sitting here thinking, what I heard before the game from one of your coaches, from a college football legend, is not what we saw in the field for all 4 quarters. Yeah, we saw some fire from the defense at times, and yeah, we saw the defense play fast, and Ryan Day talked about how Cody Simon played possessed, and that's one thing that even Tim May, after the game and the post-game presser, asked Ryan Day if he realized that Cody Simon played possessed, because I think he did play like that. So I'm not mad about like that kind of stuff. We want to see that level of play. What we're getting from the offense at times, really the entire team, but for some reason the offense, specifically in this past game, let's just focus on Nebraska. I don't have time to go back to Oregon and Michigan State, because y'all, we will be here all day. But if we just go back to what happened against Nebraska, it's homecoming. Urban Meyer's in town. You're big noon. Everybody named Mama's watching Ohio State. Way more than normal. The last team to win a national championship in Columbus, Ohio, was there getting recognized. And what did we find? That Ohio State wasn't ready to go, had a slow start. They weren't amped up. They weren't excited. They weren't ready to get back on the field. That's a problem. That's a bigger problem than maybe the fact that they're not playing good enough to beat elite teams. Y'all ain't even ready to play the game. What are we talking about? We're talking about a team that over and over and over and over and over has a problem getting amped up to play. Ohio State has 1 loss right now, and the luxury about the 12-team playoff is there's a good chance they're still going to make it. There's still a good chance they're going to make the Big Ten championship game, and they got to take care of business and get some help from other teams. Wisconsin losing to Penn State this past Saturday, that helps Ohio State get that shot to make it into the Big Ten championship game. But they're pretty much a lock. If they're 10-2 at the end of the season, they're pretty much a lock to make the playoff. And I think that may have hurt the Buckeyes' level of intensity on Saturday. Because if I'm a young player, 18 to 22, and I know that even on our C day, we could beat Nebraska, you might meld in on a few plays. You might not be ready to go early. You might not actually kick it into high gear until midway through the second quarter. And you may realize, oh, we can't run the ball, but it's cool. We're Ohio State. We're going to win. And you may realize, I might not bring my A game today. And I think what we saw on Saturday, I'm not saying that was a mindset, but we saw a lot of players not bring their A game. If we go into any game and Ohio State is struggling to run the ball, but they nearly have twice as many runs as passes, that's a problem. Will Howard's efficiency was right there. 81% passer on Saturday, 13 to 16, 221 through the air, 3 touchdowns. If you give me that stat line before the game and say, if Will Howard does this, what do you think Ohio State's going to do against Nebraska? Oh, they're going to cruise to a win. 21, 28 points. Like, they're going to cruise to a win. They're going to cover that 25.5-point spread. It didn't happen. That didn't happen. Those were Will Howard's numbers. 13 to 16, 221, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, a 246.7 passer rating. And y'all, that's just stupid. That's just stupid good. I mean, they're just saying that man was getting his job done. But what wasn't getting the job done was, in totality, the fire that Ohio State needed to have, especially when your left tackle isn't there. You may have to go a little bit harder to compensate for his absence. Y'all didn't do that. And that's a problem. We're going to dive into the coaches later in the show and dive into one specific issue with the team later in the show. But my biggest thing is, it's Ohio State. Y'all said Natty or bust. Y'all are saying, speaking of the players and the coaches, y'all are saying this is beat Michigan, win the conference, win the Natty. And what we're finding is y'all not playing like that is what y'all might be doing. Because what we saw on Saturday night was, Michigan beat Michigan State, which, I mean, both teams aren't that good. So you would kind of get a nod to the home team. That's what happened. But Michigan's doing some stuff with their defensive line, moving their tackles. Mason Graham, forget the other guy's name. The two big guys in the middle. They're dropping one guy in coverage at times. They are, I believe Mason Graham was bumped out to edge at times. Is that Michigan preparing for Ohio State? Because I believe he was the right end, which is over the left tackle. Now, even though it's going to be slower for the big boy to get to the quarterback, Ohio State's already down one left tackle. Excuse me, they're down two now. And so we don't know when Zen Michalski's going to come back. If he does come back by the game against Michigan, cool. But what we saw at his first start this year was he is a liability. In the play, excuse me, let's go a little bit further. The coaches didn't help him. The players can only do so much, but the coaches didn't help him. And that's a problem. Because let's just say Michigan was doing that to prepare for Ohio State. Michigan already put that on film. So Ryan Day can't say in the postgame presser, regardless of the win or loss of that game, oh, man, we didn't see that. We didn't know about that. We got to wait to see what was on film because they did some things we didn't expect. And if it's asked, well, this was a little bit different. Did you guys expect that? And he's like, I don't really know. It's already on film. Oh, yeah. A lot of the things we see in college football may not have been on film this year. They have been on film in previous years. And what do you have? So many resources to dig up, to look back at previous years, to figure out what certain coaches do during certain tendencies. And maybe they don't show it in this year. Maybe you got to go back 3 years to look things up. And why do I say that? Because this is college football. You got to make sure you dot every I, cross every T, and make sure everything is done properly to prepare you for the next game. Ohio State's not prepared for games. They're struggling to beat Nebraska on their best day. They're 1 point shy of beating the number one team in the country, which makes me think, and I believe, they're not playing good enough to beat the best teams in the country.